Good afternoon, folks. This is Robert Chappell, Executive Editor of Madison365, with your daily update for Monday, April 5th. Hope you had a wonderful weekend. Hope you had a good holiday if you celebrate. And we have news that is not particularly great today on a couple of fronts. First, before we get into that, though, I need to tell you about our sponsors. It is Metcalf's Monday, as it is every Monday. Metcalf's Markets is a fourth-generation, family-owned and operated supermarket with stores in Madison, at Hilldale and behind West Town Mall, and in Wauwatosa at 68th and State. They are local focused. They work to support local farmers, locally produced products, have over 3,500 local products on their shelves. And because we are still in a pandemic, as we'll talk about in a moment, you can order for pickup or delivery at any time at shopmetcalfs.com. Also today, this week, the update is supported by Forward Theater Company and their production of Lewiston Clarkston. Forward Theater Company presents Lewiston Clarkston by Samuel Hunter, a two-play experience that follows the descendants of the famous explorers who struggled to forge their own legacies in the modern American landscape. This virtual theater experience is streaming online April 9th. That's later this week, April 9th through the 25th. Tickets are available at forwardtheater.com. That's theater with an E-R, not the fancy R-E way. Spell it, forwardtheater.com. And we appreciate Forward Theater support as well. So the news today on the coronavirus front, as I mentioned, is not great. We're going to talk about some let's do the state numbers first, and then we got some kind of bad news out of Dane County, or not necessarily bad news, but concerning news out of Dane County. We'll talk about in a minute. You may have seen that earlier today. We have 307 new cases today, about 1,300 cases on Saturday and Sunday, right? Which is kind of a lot for the weekend. It's kind of a lot anyway, but it's kind of a lot for the weekend especially. As is typical, the number of new tests that we see reported is lower on Monday. So 2,800 tests, new results reported today. 307 of those are positive. That's about 11% positive. The more concerning number to me, as we talk about every day on here, is the positive test rate. The number, the percentage of all tests in the past 7 days that return positive results. We tried and we worked and we looked and we watched for months to try to get that below 3.0, because that's the 3.0 is kind of where the cutoff is for where public health people are less concerned, right? 3.0 is kind of there's nothing magical about 3.0, but 3.0 is kind of the benchmark where if you're below 3.0% positives, you've got it pretty well under control. And we were at 2.0 only a couple weeks ago. And now we're at 3.4. That has gone up steadily over the past 2 weeks. We hit 3.0 on Friday. We didn't like that. We had 3.2 on Saturday, 3.3 on Sunday, and 3.4 today. So, that's not great news. I think it's not real clear why that's happening. It could be a sort of a combination of things. I don't think it's really related to the repeal of the mask mandate, which just happened Friday, because that number, that positive test rate has been going up since March 14th is when we hit our low point at 2.0. So I don't think it's the mask mandate that's causing that. I think it's just a general sense of that we're done with this now, that everything's fine, and we can just go about our business and start to have gatherings and start to whatever, and things are turning around. Now, we did only report one fatality today. Again, Mondays are typically low for fatalities because they take a while to process the paperwork, to certify the death certificate and all that kind of stuff. So only one fatality today. Our total death toll now 6,640. This is sorry, just saying this. Vigilance exhaustion, I think, is a really good way to say this. We are definitely exhausted from having to be vigilant all the time, but unfortunately, we got to keep hunkered down for a little bit more. Now, here's the bright side, I guess, is that we've seen vaccinations continue to accelerate, right? So we're getting far more people vaccinated every day, than we're seeing new cases every day. So, the numbers today, it's looking, I'm learning, I'm figuring out how these vaccines are being reported. And it seems like there's a couple of days delay. It seems like the vaccine reporting is sort of mimicking the positive test reporting, in that the numbers that we're seeing of new vaccines each day are actually from like 2 or 3 days previous, which is fine as long as we kind of know that. So what that means is over the weekend, we saw 105,000 doses administered were reported on Saturday and Sunday. And today we only see 3,500 reported, which means that probably, like, we didn't go from 105,000 yesterday to 3,500 today, right? In actual administration of vaccines. What that tells me is those that were reported on Saturday and Sunday were actually administered and entered into the data like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and just showed up on my spreadsheet on Sunday, right? And then not as many lots of doses were probably given yesterday, but just not entered into the data yet. So it'll catch up. It's fine. I'm over-explaining probably. But the bottom line is we have more than 20% of the population now completed. More than 1 in 5 adults in Wisconsin is fully vaccinated, right? We need to get that. So we're about a quarter of the way there, right? We're trying to get to 80% vaccinated. And the governor says that there will be enough supply of vaccine to get there by the end of July, which is only 3 months away. Now, a lot can happen in 3 months. We could, if this trend of upward numbers continues, things could be really bad in 3 months. We could have a lot of cases, a lot of illness, a lot of hospitalizations, a lot of deaths in the next 3 months if we're not careful. It took us 3 months to go from like 500 cases a day to 7,000 cases a day back in the fall. So if we're not careful, we could be back over that several thousand cases a day, which is where Michigan is right now. Michigan is looking at like 8,000 cases a day. We're at 591 per day. So if we're not careful, this thing could go very bad very quickly, and we could, by the time we're finishing the vaccine thing, we could be really in a catastrophic and crisis situation. Or we could, kind of stay vigilant, do the right thing, and keep our masks on and keep our distance and all that, and continue to accelerate the vaccinations. Because here's the thing. Having enough supply is one thing. Getting the supply to the people is another thing, right? And that's just going to be the difficult part, especially when we're talking about marginalized communities, unhoused people of color, people who have language barriers. And in fact, I want to talk about this story that we did that the Wisconsin Watch has on the site this morning, that we put up this morning. There are a lot of barriers, things you wouldn't think of. For example, when you go to make an account on many websites, like when you have to make an account at like Walgreens or whatever, they'll ask security questions. And one of the people in this story said one of the security questions was, what's your astrological sign? This is so you can log back in and they know it's you. But for an elderly Hmong person who grew up in Laos, what's your astrological sign is not a meaningful question. This is not a thing they do. It's not a thing that's part of their culture. So like that's So now that person now is having a hard time getting logged in to try to get an appointment. Not only that, but there's really inconsistent rules on who has to check an ID. Walgreens and those are not supposed to be checking your IDs, but guess who is more likely to be asked for an ID? You can probably guess. So it's a very important story. It's on the front page of our website right now still. Take a look. There's going to be a lot of work to be done to overcome those barriers to get the vaccines to people. In the meantime, those of you who have the privilege of having a relatively easy time getting a vaccine, go get it. Right? Don't feel bad. Don't feel guilty. Don't feel like, I'm going to wait my turn. Your turn is now. As of today, it is everybody's turn. So if you have the privilege of getting it easy, get it done. Because that not only helps you, it helps everybody you come in contact with. Right? So you can actually contribute to this ongoing effort by getting yourself vaccinated. On the podcast, Stephanie's been making the analogy to when you're in an airplane and the mask drops down because the cabin's been depressurized. They always say, put your own mask on first and then help other people. Get your own shot first and then help other people get their shots, right? Okay, so that's relatively good news on the vaccine front, just the fact that we're at 20% and the fact that we're getting the daily number of new vaccinations getting done continues to go up. So it's not like we're going to just stay at this rate until it's done. We're going to stay at this rate and then continue to accelerate more and more shots every day until it's done. Right? But in the meantime, there's got to be some intentional work to get it to those people who do have barriers. Okay. One other thing, a bad piece of news out of Dane County that I want to mention is, and we don't have a lot of detail. Unfortunately, I had to ask for more details than they gave us, but Public Health Madison Dane County today announced that a child care center was the center of a major outbreak. They didn't say where, obviously, for obvious reasons, or which child care center. But here's the problem. We keep hearing that children can't get it and can't pass it along, or don't very much, and that's been the principal argument to reopen schools. But there's a child care center here in Dane County where 16 children under the age of 7 tested positive. 5 of their caregivers tested positive, and those 21 people from inside that daycare center spread it to 14 family members. So 35 people connected to that one daycare center now got COVID. Now, the children all had very mild symptoms, which is typical. Children are, we know, less likely to get it and less likely to get very sick from it, but that doesn't mean they can't get it or don't get it. And it doesn't mean they can't pass it on, obviously, because this is an instance of that. Now, anecdote is not data, right? One instance like this doesn't mean that every childcare center is going to suddenly become a super spreader place, or that this happened in one daycare center, therefore we can't open schools. So what we don't know is, was the childcare center licensed? Were they wearing their masks all the time? Did they have proper ventilation? We just haven't been given that information. So you can't use this one instance to say, therefore, we can't open schools or anything like that. However, you also clearly can't really say anymore children don't get it or can't pass it on. That's just obviously untrue at this point. So we will keep an eye on that. It sounds like there are several dozen other people in close proximity to the people in that childcare center who are sort of watching. who have been identified as close contacts and will be tested and are being isolated. Now, one other thing that PHMDC, Public Health Madison-Dane County, did mention coming out of that is that in children, COVID-19 symptoms might look like seasonal allergies. It's nasal congestion, which is not really something that adults get with COVID-19. A cough, a low-grade fever. The mild symptoms that you might think are just, my kid's got the sniffles today, because in children, usually COVID-19 presents as something like that, something like sniffles. So that what they're saying is, if your kid seems like they have allergies today, go get them tested, because they might be passing it along to their teachers. Also, this child care center outbreak is another argument for vaccinations of teachers and child care workers. Pranisha just said that. You read my mind, Pranisha. Yeah, I mean, but this is why, this is one of the reasons that teachers and childcare workers were eligible first. The other thing we don't know really is when this outbreak took place. And I've been asking for more detail, but they're very sketchy on the details. So was this a month ago, before the vaccines were really going so fast, or was this like last week? And if it was just last week, why were those childcare workers not vaccinated yet? So, again, I still think it's probably okay to the extent that we've been sort of phased, careful reopening of schools with vaccinated teachers and the rest of the staff also vaccinated. That's probably still okay, but also, again, it's another reason we can't let our guard down. We can't say kids don't get it, it's fine, just open schools, it's fine. Like, you obviously still have to take precautions. I love this, Pranisha, also. And this is a thing. We talked on Friday about the fact that the state has issued $6.2 million worth of grants to a bunch of local nonprofits. 100 organizations across the state are going to be helping to get the vaccine information, as well as vaccines, into those neighborhoods. And transportation is one of the things that they're funding. So the local sort of social service agencies will actually be doing transportation, like transporting vaccines into community centers and transporting people to the clinics and all that stuff. So you're absolutely right, Pranisha, that transportation is one of the barriers for sure. As is, frankly, the whole thing about getting 2 shots. Like, you have to get 2 appointments. If you're in that situation where it's hard to get 1 shot, I mean, imagine how hard it is to get 2. So I think there's going to be some talk about prioritizing the single dose Johnson & Johnson for those more vulnerable communities, just because it's just harder to get the 2 shots. So I don't know why I have my other chair in the back there. So, okay, we're going to take a short pause. We're going to hear from our other sponsor today, UW Health. And we'll be back with more local news right after this. Do not scroll away.
Here in the Midwest, community is important.
Having a healthcare system that's looking out for us,
that's actively addressing the racial disparities in healthcare, is important.
When we can get good quality care, we can do more. We can achieve more.
We can be the kind of community we want to be, and that's really important.
UW Health. Remarkable medicine. Remarkable care.
All right. Thank you to UW Health for their support of the update. So today, this morning, I'll give this a listen. Black Oxygen as our weekly podcast where Angela Russell interviews Black folks from around Wisconsin about how they breathe, how they survive, how they get by as Black people in Wisconsin. And today she talked with Dr. Eddie Moore Jr., who he's lived in Green Bay forever, like 20-something years. But I never knew him very much until he was a panelist on our Wisconsin Leadership Summit this past year. And he is a dynamic diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant. He is the founder of the Privilege Institute and of the White Privilege Conference. and just really, I mean, it's an important listen. I listened to it this morning, and I am in this business. I do this a lot, and he said some things that like I learned a lot from him, but also said some things that kind of made even me a little uncomfortable. You know what I mean? Which is good. That's what we need. White people have to feel a little bit uncomfortable. So give that a listen. I highly recommend it wherever you get your podcast. Where Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or just go to the Madison365.org/Black Oxygen and you can listen to it there. But give it a listen. This is the graphic from the story I already mentioned about the vaccines and getting them into those vulnerable communities. This is our own Kynala Phillips, who's volunteering in Milwaukee, getting information to folks. Gail, I see your question on Dane County. I'll get to that. That's a good question, and I will get to that as soon as we're done through this the rest of this news here. The other feature we have this morning is Gloria Reyes, proud Madison East alum, is finishing her term as president of the Madison School Board, and it has been a very eventful 3-year term. We lost one superintendent after a year filled with, I think 8 teachers were fired or suspended for using racial slurs over the course of one school year. We had a incident of violence against a student, a story we reported that we broke a couple of years ago, and we had the debate over police in schools. We had a pandemic. We hired a new superintendent who then rescinded his acceptance of the job, so we had to hire another new superintendent. We hired the first Black superintendent. All of this under Gloria Reyes' tenure on the school board. So, and now she has taken a job as CEO of Briar Patch. So Dave Dahmer spoke with her at length, has a long profile and a long sort of retrospective on this tumultuous couple of years on the Madison School Board. It's a good read. I highly recommend it to you. In national news, Chadwick Boseman remains the odds-on favorite to win an Oscar for Best Actor. He won the SAG Award last night, the Screen Actors Guild Award last night, posthumously for his performance in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, which is now available on Netflix. And he was, 43 when he died of cancer in August, and since then has won a number of awards for his final performance in that film based on the play. That is the news that I have for you today. We also have we just posted from CNN a recap of today's proceedings in the trial of Derek Chauvin in Minneapolis, charged with murder for the killing of George Floyd. We have the police chief testified against Derek Chauvin today, and we've got a recap of that on the site as well. All right, to Gail's question, this is a good question. What criteria did Dane County meet that led them to remove the outdoor mask mandate? The thing is that they did not really publish specific metrics that they had to reach. This is something that states and counties did early in the pandemic, where they said, if we reach these 3 numbers, then we can open up this thing. And that kind of gamified it, and it kind of it made it so we're all like watching every day, and it was like almost like, hey, we win, or we took a step closer or whatever. And I think what they kind of learned was that wasn't the best way to do it. That you didn't want people like keeping score exactly. You just wanted to get a sense of actually, like, because the data is just more complicated than that, right? So there weren't any specific metrics that were published that led them to that, and they have not been real public about which metrics they used. What I can tell you is Dane County, we talk about the positive test rate, statewide being 3.4%. In Dane County, it's 0.7. So, while it's true that viruses travel as people travel, it's also true that it affects it is geographically tied, right? So the fact is that Dane County, because we have had mask mandates, and because people have, even if we don't have an outdoor mask mandate, I was out this weekend. It was a beautiful weekend, and even being outdoors this weekend, most people had masks on outdoors, even though it's no longer required. So just people around Dane County are just more likely to do that, right? So given that, and given that our Dane County's positive test rate is 0.7%, given that we're seeing our weekly average cases are actually decreasing while the rest of the state is increasing, those various things put together. That, and one other thing, just last summer, there was just no evidence that outdoor events even with crowds were dangerous at all. Like almost every bit of spread of this virus has happened indoors. That's just the case. That's just true. And we've learned that. And so given that the numbers in Dane County are very good, and in fact moving in the right direction, unlike the rest of the state, and the fact that outdoor events just aren't particularly dangerous, those things combined led them to remove the limits on outdoor gatherings, except that a large outdoor gathering, you still have to be able to space yourself apart 6 feet. And also just to take away the mask mandate, but leave it as a recommendation. Like you should wear a mask, we don't have to, right? Okay, so that is the news for today. I appreciate it. And I would appreciate it if you would, you'll notice we had 3 sponsors of the show today. So we really appreciate that those local companies, Metcalf's, Forward Theater, and UW Health, excuse me, value what we're doing here enough to support us, and they value you. That's why they sponsor this show and put ads on this show to get to you, because they want to reach you with their message and their branding. So one thing you can do to help us continue to get that sponsorship and to get that sort of corporate support is help us keep our numbers up. Share this, hit the share button, tell your friends to tune in at 4:00, and that helps us a lot, and it's very easy to do. So that's all for today. It's a beautiful evening. Hope you get out and enjoy it. And I'll be back tomorrow. We'll be back tomorrow morning with the It's Only 10 Minutes podcast, and I'll be back tomorrow at 4:00. Until then, take care.
This is 365 Media.